Margaret's journey. They told me to water the plants and double lock the doors, as if I were a housemaid they could trust but never invite. You're too old for long flights, Grandma. Just watch the house, they said, piling into their sleek black van, their laughter spilling out in waves about Greek beaches, fresh seafood, and sunlit tavernas. They didn't glance back to see my face, etched with the quiet hurt I'd taught myself to bury. I waved, my hand steady, my voice silent, as the van disappeared down the suburban street, its tail lights blinking like careless afterthoughts. That night, I wandered the house like a ghost, my footsteps soft on the worn hardwood. Their coffee cups sat unwashed in the sink, a damp towel draped carelessly over the sofa arm, a child's sneaker abandoned under the dining table. The evidence of their lives clung to every corner: Michael's half-read newspaper, Sarah's scarf forgotten on a chair, Sophie's doodle of a cat on a napkin. Yet I was invisible within it, a fixture like the creaky staircase or the chipped teapot I'd used for decades. I poured a glass of water, sipped it slowly, the coolness grounding me as the clock's ticking echoed louder than my own breath. The house, once alive with Robert's deep laughter and Michael's childhood chatter, felt hollow, its walls heavy with the weight of a role I'd outgrown but hadn't escaped. The next morning, their plane tickets waited in my mailbox, unstamped, tucked in a crisp travel agency envelope. Athens, 2 adults, 2 children, seats neatly paired. My name was absent, as expected. I stood on the porch, the envelope heavy in my hands, the autumn air sharp with the scent of damp leaves and distant wood smoke. I stared at it, willing it to explain itself. It didn't. Inside, I placed the tickets on the kitchen table, its wood worn from years of family meals I'd cooked but seldom savored. I made tea, the kettle's whistle piercing the silence. At my age, when pain strikes, you brew tea and wait for your hands to steady. Mine didn't. They trembled as I gripped the mug, steam curling like a memory of my husband, Robert, gone 20 years. His photo on the mantel, young and smiling in a faded suit, seemed to watch me. He wouldn't have let this happen, wouldn't have let them erase me so easily. I'd been many things in this house: wife, nurse, cook, mender of broken toys and bruised hearts. For the last decade, I was just Grandma, not Margaret, not Mama's shadow in the background, reliable but unseen. They assumed I'd stay put, waiting for postcards or texts with blue sky photos and hollow words, "Wish you were here." They never meant to bring me. My hands shook harder as I opened my old address book, its pages yellowed, edges curling like autumn leaves. I found the travel agency's number, scrawled in my own careful hand years ago. "I'd like to cancel these tickets," I said, my voice low but firm. The girl on the phone hesitated, her youth audible in her pause. "Can I ask why, ma'am?" "No," I replied. "Just cancel them." A long silence, then a polite, almost cautious, "Of course." I scribbled the confirmation number on a napkin, brewed another cup of tea, and sat in the armchair where I'd once rocked my son Michael to sleep, his small body warm against mine. The room felt smaller now, the walls pressing in with the weight of my own silence, accumulated over years of swallowing what I should have said. I opened the drawer where I kept my passport. Still valid, its pages crisp, untouched for nearly 3 decades. I had $12,000 in savings, a few thousand more in bonds, no debts, no one depending on me anymore. The realization was both freeing and sharp, like a blade slicing through years of obligation. I sat at my ancient laptop, its keys sticky from disuse, and booked a flight to Athens, 1 seat, aisle, my fingers steady for the first time that day. I called my neighbor Ellen, her voice warm and curious through the crackle of her old phone. Can you water the plants? I asked. Going somewhere, hun, she replied, a smile in her tone. Just a little trip, I said, keeping it vague, not ready to share the rebellion stirring in me. I packed a small suitcase, comfortable walking shoes, my best silk scarf, its emerald threads catching the light, and the navy dress I hadn't worn since Robert's funeral. Not for mourning, but because it made me feel sharp, alive, a woman who could still command a room. I'd forgotten how to feel that way, how to stand in a space and claim it as my own. The night before my flight, I sat on the porch, the street hushed, ivy swaying in the cool breeze. The stars were faint, dulled by the city's glow, but they were there, steady above the rooftops. I thought of what Michael and his wife, Sarah, would say when they realized I wasn't waiting at home, tending their plants, guarding their absence. Maybe they'd call, their voices tight with worry or anger. Maybe they wouldn't. For once, I didn't care. I wasn't staying behind to tend their lives while they lived what could have been mine. I sipped chamomile tea, the mug warm in my hands, and let the quiet settle around me, not oppressive but chosen, a silence I owned. Morning came softly, the sky pale pink through the kitchen window. I locked the door, left a note for Ellen pinned to the fridge, and walked down the porch steps with purpose, my suitcase rolling behind me, its wheels humming against the concrete. I didn't look back. At the airport, the gate agent, young and polished in a crisp uniform, glanced at my passport and smiled with rehearsed kindness. "Enjoy your flight, ma'am," she said, her voice bright but distant. I nodded, gripping my boarding pass like a talisman, its edges creasing under my fingers. The terminal was a chaos of glass, metal, and hurried voices, families arguing, travelers rushing, announcements crackling overhead. I moved through it with a quiet certainty, as if pretending to belong could make it true. You learn that trick when you've been invisible too long, when your presence is assumed but never acknowledged. On the plane, I settled into my aisle seat, watching others wrestle over stuffed bags into overhead bins, their movements frantic, their voices sharp. A man in his 30s, wedding ring glinting under the cabin lights, quiet eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses, took the seat beside me. "Long trip?" he asked as we taxied, his tone polite but not pressing. "Long enough," I replied, my voice soft but firm. He smiled faintly, then turned to his book, leaving me alone, which I appreciated. I slept a shallow, necessary sleep, the kind that holds grief at bay, keeps it from spilling into rage. When I woke, the Mediterranean stretched below, an endless blue shimmering like a promise I hadn't known I needed. I wasn't here for postcards or tourist traps. I was here because they told me I couldn't be, because they'd decided my place was at home, tending to their absence. In Athens, the heat was thick, pressing against my skin even inside the airport. I took a taxi to a modest pension on a narrow street, its whitewashed walls glowing under the midday sun, the air scented with lemon and dust. The woman at the desk, her hair streaked with grey, called me madam with a warmth that felt earned, not performative. In my room, I set my suitcase by the wall and sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the tiled floor, its cracks tracing paths like forgotten roads. Grief doesn't always weep, sometimes it's just sitting still, tallying the birthdays and holidays where you smiled through being unwanted, where you played the role they assigned without question. That evening, I walked a few blocks, the streets alive with chatter and the clink of glasses. I found a bakery, its warm light spilling onto the cobblestones, and ordered bread and olives, their salt sharp on my tongue. I ate slowly, savoring each bite, the act deliberate, almost defiant. The waiter, an older man with kind eyes and a lined face, didn't rush me. My phone sat untouched in my bag, its silence a gift. No one expected my updates, and that was a freedom I hadn't tasted in years. The next morning, I woke to soft light filtering through the shutters, painting the room in gold and shadow. I opened them, letting Athens breathe into the space, the air carrying the faint hum of a distant scooter and the scent of blooming jasmine. I reached for my lipstick, a rose shade from decades ago, before life dulled to beige and apologies. I applied it carefully, watching my reflection in the small mirror, reclaiming a piece of the woman I'd been. At the front desk, I asked for a quiet place, not a tourist spot. Try Anafatika, the woman said, handing me a scribbled note, her pen scratching the paper with purpose. I walked through its whitewashed alleys, past sleeping cats curled in doorways, past chipped pots bursting with geraniums, their red petals defiant against the heat. My feet ached, but I kept going until I found a stone bench tucked under a fig tree. I sat, existing, as young couples passed, their laughter bright and careless, their hands intertwined. No one stared, no one called me too old, no one told me to stay home. I thought of my granddaughter, Sophie, 16, with her silly photo filters and bright eyes, her texts full of hearts and emojis. I bought a postcard from a street vendor, its image a blue-domed church against the sea. Dear Sophie, I wrote, my pen steady, guess where I am? Greece. The sea is bluer than you can imagine. Love, Grandma. I mailed it near a cafe, the post box rusted but sturdy, then ordered coffee, drinking it slowly, the way my mother did when the world was still, her hands cradling the cup like a prayer. That evening, back in my room, I caught myself humming a tune Robert used to sing while shaving, his razor tapping the sink in rhythm, his voice low and warm. I wasn't young, wasn't brave, but I was here, in a place I'd chosen for myself. That mattered more than I could name. 2 days later, at breakfast, I sat at a small table by the window, the morning light soft on my hands. A woman my age sat nearby, her silver hair swept into a no-nonsense bun, her eyes sharp behind half-moon glasses. You use too much butter, she said, glancing at my toast, her tone dry but not unkind. I smiled, surprised by my own amusement. Better than too little, I replied. She nodded, a spark of approval in her gaze. That was the beginning. Her name was Claire, a retired school principal from Lyon, widowed, traveling alone. Her confidence was quiet, like good perfume, never overpowering but always present. We started walking together, not far, just through Athens' quieter streets, noticing what others missed, a lilac-painted shutter hanging askew, a dog dozing beside a weathered statue, its stone smoothed by time. She didn't photograph them for social media, she just looked, really looked, her eyes tracing the world with a kind of reverence. Over lunch, under a terrace draped with vines, the air heavy with the scent of grilled lamb and rosemary, we sipped cold white wine, its chill grounding us in the heat. Claire spoke of her students, the troublemakers she secretly admired for their defiance, their refusal to be tamed. I told her about my garden back home, how my tomatoes never ripened despite my coaxing, how I'd whisper to them like they could hear me. And your family? She asked, her gaze steady, cutting through my hesitation. I paused, the wineglass cool in my hand, its stem fragile under my fingers. They're fine, I said, my voice quieter than I meant. They thought I was too old to travel. Her eyes narrowed, a flicker of indignation crossing her face. They said that to you. I nodded, the weight of it settling between us. She sipped her wine, her silence a kind of judgment, not of me but of them. You're here, she said finally, her voice firm. They were wrong. That night, I lay awake, the ceiling fan whirring softly, its blades slicing the warm air. I thought of the years I'd stayed small, cooking for birthdays I didn't enjoy, funding trips I wasn't invited on, telling myself they were busy, that I was needed. But I wasn't, not beyond meals and babysitting, not beyond being the dependable shadow in their lives. The next morning, Claire knocked on my door, a map tucked under her arm, her eyes glinting with purpose. "Florence," she declared, unfolding the map with a flourish. "I've always wanted to see the Uffizi." I hesitated, the idea both thrilling and daunting. "Why not?" I said finally, a smile tugging at my lips. We booked train tickets that afternoon, two women over 70, giggling like schoolgirls planning a summer adventure. The train to Florence rolled through golden vineyards and sleepy towns, the countryside soft and timeless, like a painting Robert once bought at a flea market, its frame cheap but its colors alive. Our hotel was old, charming, with a creaky elevator and heavy brass keys that felt like history in my hand. Our room's tiny balcony overlooked red roofs and laundry lines strung between buildings, a view that felt honest, unpolished. Standing before the birth of Venus in the Uffizi, I didn't feel awe but recognition, a quiet beauty that didn't need to shout, that existed with an inevitability that tightened my throat. We walked for hours, our steps slow but deliberate, stopping at a cafe where Claire flirted with the waiter, her laughter making her young without pretense. Over pasta by the Arno, the river reflecting the fading light, she said, "You're different, Margaret. You sit taller." I nodded, unsure how to name the change, feeling it in my bones but not yet in words. My phone buzzed with 24 missed calls. Michael, Sarah, their names lighting up the screen like accusations. I ignored the voicemails, reading only Michael's text, "Mom, please call. The kids are upset." I felt distance, not anger, a space wide enough to breathe, to exist without justifying myself. We took a bus to Fiesole, the road winding up the hill, Florence sprawling below like a tapestry woven with gold and shadow. "This was missing," I said, not meaning the view but something deeper, something I'd lost in years of staying behind. Claire nodded, her silence understanding, her presence a steady anchor. In Lisbon, the city pulsed with a quiet defiance, its sidewalks shimmering from last night's rain, the air thick with salt and possibility. Our guesthouse had blue shutters and a balcony overlooking a square where children kicked a faded soccer ball between rusted benches. Claire caught a fever the second day, her face pale but her spirit unyielding. "It's nothing," she said, waving me off. But I stayed, reading to her from a worn novel we'd found in Florence, pouring tea into a chipped cup, the steam rising like a small offering. It wasn't duty, it was choice, different from the years I'd cared for Robert through his illness, Michael through his tantrums, Sophie through her fevers, even the dog through its final days. This felt like mine, a care given freely, not demanded. When Claire recovered, we found a fado bar tucked between laundry-hung alleys, its dim light and wooden tables worn smooth by time. The singer, a woman with a voice like rusted silk, sang of loss and resilience, her notes weaving through the smoke and chatter. I understood without knowing the words, my heart still as the music settled into me. A letter from Michael was slipped under our guesthouse door, his handwriting rushed, almost desperate. "Mom, we don't understand." Sophie cried. "If you're punishing us, you've made your point. Come home." No apology, just worry over how my absence looked, as if I'd left to shame them rather than to find myself. I folded it into a drawer, its weight heavy but not binding. Over breakfast in the courtyard, sunlight filtering through grapevines, the air sweet with bread and coffee, I said, they're starting to understand. Claire smirked, her eyes sharp. About time. Sophie sent a photo Claire had taken me on the balcony, unposed, looking out at the Lisbon sunset, my face calm, unguarded. You look happy, she wrote. I replied, Seville now. Hot, stubborn, beautiful. I'll call tomorrow. Seville burned with life, its alleys loud with voices, flamenco guitars, and the clatter of plates. At a courtyard restaurant, a woman in her 70s danced flamenco, her feet striking the stone like a vow kept, her face fierce with presence. My heart swelled, full of something I couldn't name but felt like fire. At the Alcazar, its tiled walls told stories of centuries, mirroring the ones I'd locked inside for years. Disappointments swallowed, joys deferred. Sarah messaged, Margaret, we didn't mean to leave you out. We thought you'd be comfortable at home. We're sorry. It was a start, fragile but real, like a crack letting light into a darkened room. Sophie sent another message, her words careful, Dad's scared. He knows he can't apologize with flowers. I sent her a photo from the Alcazar, my silhouette against an archway, and she replied with a single heart emoji, a small, perfect response. In Granada, the Alhambra's arches and fountains felt eternal, unhurried, their beauty carved by hands that understood patience. Claire photographed me on a bench, light and shadow framing my face, the air cool with the scent of orange blossoms. You've remembered something, she said, her voice soft but certain. I nodded. I'm not just someone who stayed behind. The climb to the Alhambra had been steep, my knees aching, but I'd kept going, not to prove anything but to see it for myself. Sophie messaged again, Dad's reading your messages over and over. He's quiet, like he's learning. I sent her a photo of the Alhambra's courtyard, my face calm, and she replied with another heart, her silence louder than words. In Cadiz, the sea whispered secrets, its waves steady against the shore. I walked barefoot on the beach, the cold water sharp against my toes, the sand gritty under my soles. I recorded a message for Michael, my voice steady, I'm not angry, but I'm changed. I love you, but I'm not your backup plan. I'm a whole person. No reply came, but Sophie sent a drawing, a sketch of me on the beach, my scarf fluttering, captioned, she remembered who she was. I stared at it, my chest tight with pride and something softer, like recognition. In Barcelona, Gaudi's buildings curved like dreams carved in stone, their colors bold, unapologetic. Sarah messaged, we were afraid of your age, not your limitations, but ours. We're sorry. If you come home, we'd like to start over. It was a beginning, tentative but honest. Claire left for Marseilles, her hug brief but warm, her final words simple, keep going. I booked a flight home, not to return to their role for me but to claim my own. My house was unchanged, quiet but alive, the plants thriving under Ellen's care. Sophie arrived the next day, her hug fierce and wordless, her backpack slung over one shoulder. She'd seen my notebook in a photo Claire shared, its pages open to my unvoiced truths. I started my own, she said, handing me a small spiral notebook. Her first lines read, I refuse to inherit silence, the idea that women outgrow desire, that aging is decline. We made soup, chopping carrots and onions side by side, laughing over her stories of school and a boy who didn't notice her. Michael and Sarah came later, their faces unguarded, their steps hesitant on my porch. We don't know how to start, Sarah said, her hands clasped tightly. You showed up, I replied, my voice steady. Michael looked at me, his eyes tired but searching. "You didn't lose me," he said. "You stopped seeing me." It was enough for now, a crack in the wall we'd built between us. We ate lemon tart, the silence careful but honest, the kind that comes when words are still forming. Sophie read from her notebook, her voice trembling but clear. "My grandma taught me disappearing quietly is a slow death, that staying soft isn't staying silent." No one spoke, the weight of her words settling like dust after a storm. Days later, Michael sent a letter, his handwriting careful. "Thank you for the tea, for letting us sit in your silence. I'd like to try, not to erase anything, but to build something better." I didn't reply immediately. I called for Sunday dinner, bringing a lemon tart, its sharpness a quiet challenge. Their house felt different, no longer mine, the furniture rearranged, the walls holding new art. They listened more, their questions softer, their pauses longer. Michael had read my notebook, seen in Sophie's photos. "It hurt," he said, his voice low. "Good," I replied. "You heard me." At home, I sat on the porch, the night air thick with jasmine. I opened my notebook, its pages worn from travel, and wrote, things I no longer apologize for, wanting space, saying no, leaving quietly, coming back louder. I was never too old. I wasn't asked if I dreamed. Now I don't wait. I go. I placed Sophie's drawing a woman on a beach, free beside Robert's photo, Claire's postcard from Marseilles by the window, its sketch of two women dancing under dim lights. The silence was mine, soft, chosen, whole, like a room I'd finally furnished for myself.